The soft light of morning settled over Whispering Pines Wildlife Sanctuary as news came that would change everything. 3 bobcat cubs had just been rescued from the illegal pet trade, but heartbreakingly, their mother hadn't made it. The cubs, taken in by the sanctuary, were scared and silent, too shaken by losing their mom to eat or move much. When nothing else worked and their condition worsened, the team took a bold step. They decided to introduce Daisy, a sweet rescue dog who had recently become a mom herself, hoping she might comfort the cubs. What started as a last-ditch idea turned into something no one expected, a deep, healing connection that changed their lives. This is the true story of Daisy, the kind-hearted mutt, and her incredible bond with 3 wild cubs who had lost everything. Before we dive in, don't forget to tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single story. The sun was just starting to peek over the mountains around Whispering Pines when Emily Johnson's phone rang. At 58, with 3 decades of wildlife work behind her, she'd thought she'd seen it all. But Ranger Mike's voice shook with urgency. "We've got 3 bobcat kittens, Emily. Real young. Some guy was caught trying to sell them at a truck stop near Tucson." His voice wavered. The mother didn't make it. She was too far gone, dehydrated and injured. Emily closed her eyes, pressing the phone tighter to her ear. Another innocent life lost to the growing exotic pet trade along Arizona's southern edge. "How old are they?" she asked, her mind already ticking through formula types and available space. "No more than 4 weeks," Mike said, "and they won't eat, not one of them. The vet's worried. They're slipping fast." Half an hour later, Emily stood in her exam room, looking down at 3 tiny bundles of fur, each no bigger than her hand. Their eyes, blue-gray and still unfocused, barely moved. Their little bodies trembled with fear and hunger. The smallest one, a female with a white mark on her ear, let out a faint cry that seemed to hang in the still air. "Oh, sweet babies," Emily whispered, gently reaching out to touch the smallest cub. It flinched, letting out a weak hiss. "I know you miss her. I'm so sorry." For the next 3 days, Emily tried everything she could think of. They turned away from bottles. Syringe feeding stressed them so badly the little male even had a seizure. The 3 of them stayed huddled in one corner of their warm enclosure, shrinking with each passing hour, their eyes losing their brightness. On the 4th morning, Emily sat slumped at her desk, her hands over her face, the sanctuary's financial reports pushed aside. This place was her heart, built on the land her grandfather left her in Arizona's mountain country. Now, almost 60, the lines on her face traced years of rescues, releases, and hard goodbyes. Her hands were worn from decades of hard work. Her granddaughter Lizzie, interning as part of her wildlife biology studies, knocked lightly before stepping in. "I heard you didn't sleep last night, Gran," she said, setting a steaming mug of coffee on the desk. At 22, Lizzie had inherited her grandmother's steady green eyes and no-nonsense way of thinking, but her methods were shaped by newer studies that hadn't existed back in Emily's early years. Emily let out a weary sigh. "Those bobcat babies aren't going to last another day without food. I've done everything, Lizzie, everything I know." Lizzie leaned onto the edge of the desk, her face thoughtful. "Not quite everything, Gran. What about Daisy?" Emily's head snapped up. "Daisy? Lizzie, she's not even a year old yet. And she's a dog, a mutt at that." "A mutt who just weaned a whole litter 3 weeks ago," Lizzie pointed out, her eyes brightening with the idea. "She's still producing a little milk, and you know she's the gentlest animal we've got." "It's too risky," Emily began, but Lizzie cut in gently. "More risky than letting those kittens fade away? You've always told me, sometimes in rehab work, you've got to try what others wouldn't dare." Emily looked at her granddaughter, old words echoing in her mind. Dr. Thompson, her mentor long ago, had once told her, "Sometimes nature just needs a little nudge to make connections it wouldn't normally make." Emily nodded slowly. "Get Daisy. But we do this cautiously, Lizzie. Very carefully." Daisy had arrived at the sanctuary last winter, a pregnant stray pulled from a freezing ditch during one of Arizona's rare snowstorms. She was a medium-sized mix of who knew what, maybe some golden retriever, maybe shepherd, her coat soft and golden, her eyes a warm, deep brown that seemed to see right through the chaos. After giving birth in the small vet clinic on site, she'd proved to be an amazing mom, and all 6 of her puppies had quickly found loving homes in the nearby town of Pine Creek. Daisy had become something of a favorite around the sanctuary after that, following Emily during her rounds, her calming energy even helping soothe the injured animals. Emily had planned to rehome her after she'd fully recovered, but that plan kept getting put off, and Daisy just stayed. They brought her into a quiet room next to where the Bobcat kittens were being kept. Emily sat down on the floor, gently cradling the smallest cub, the one with the white patch on her ear, wrapped in a towel. The little one's breaths were shallow, her small body cold even with a heated blanket beneath her. Daisy's nose twitched, her ears perked up. She walked over slowly, tail giving a few tentative wags. When she reached Emily, she lowered her head and carefully sniffed the towel. The kitten let out a weak hiss, barely a sound, really, like it took everything she had left. Emily stayed still, bracing to pull the cub away if anything went wrong. But then Daisy gave a soft whine, one that sounded heartbreakingly close to the way she used to call for her puppies. She slowly lay down next to Emily, stretched out her neck, and began to lick the kitten with soft, motherly care. The cub, who had flinched from every human hand, went still. Then, slowly, she turned her tiny face toward Daisy's fur, drawn to the warmth. "Gran," Lizzie whispered, eyes wide. "Look." Emily felt tears gathering as she gently laid the kitten closer to Daisy. The dog curled around her without hesitation, continuing to clean the tiny cub like it was her own pup. "Let's try the others," Emily said softly. One by one, they brought in the remaining 2 kittens, and again the same quiet miracle unfolded. Daisy welcomed each one, pulling them close to her warm body and licking them with steady, careful affection. Within an hour, all 3 kittens were curled at her belly, and to Emily's surprise, they started to nurse. "It's not perfect nutrition," Emily murmured, watching one of the kittens latch on. "We'll still need to add formula if they'll take it. But this bond, it might be what saves them." Lizzie gave her grandmother's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Sometimes love's the best medicine, Gran. You're the one who taught me that." In the days that followed, the change was nothing short of incredible. Under Daisy's watchful care, the Bobcat kittens started to bounce back. They put on weight, their coats grew shinier, and their eyes filled with curiosity. Daisy rarely left them, cleaning them, gently picking them up by the scruff when they wandered, even letting out low grumbles when they played too rough. The staff soon gave the kittens names. Patch, for the little female with the white ear, Scout, the bigger male, and Rascal, the smaller male who was always first to explore. Daisy somehow seemed to know who was who, reacting to each of them based on their sounds and personalities. Emily made sure to document everything, photos, videos, and detailed notes tracking their progress. She knew this kind of cross-species bonding wasn't something you saw every day, and it could hold valuable insights for future wildlife rehab work. By the time the kittens hit 8 weeks, they were eating solid food, special formula mixed with small bits of proper meat. But at night, they still curled up next to Daisy for warmth and safety. Their play had taken on classic wildcat behaviors. They stalked, pounced, and climbed anything they could. Daisy watched patiently, sometimes joining in, but mostly staying nearby as their steady comfort zone. "Their instincts are holding strong," Emily told Dr. Rivera during one of his checkups. "They're right on track with hunting behavior, even in this unusual setup." Dr. Rivera, in his 40s and deeply committed to wildlife medicine, nodded as he gently examined Scout. "They're physically doing great, and no human imprinting. That's important. But I am concerned about how attached they are to Daisy. These cubs will eventually need to be released or transferred to a facility that can care for them properly. They can't live with a dog forever. Emily had been pushing that thought to the back of her mind, even though she knew it was true. The sanctuary's goal had always been to return animals to the wild when possible, and when that wasn't an option, they found them the right kind of permanent home. Keeping wild animals, even in a loving setting, just didn't align with what Emily believed. "We'll deal with that when the time comes," she said, watching Scout leap off the table and trot straight back to Daisy, who was waiting like always. "Right now she's giving them what they need." "Just be careful," Dr. Rivera warned. "The longer they're with her, the harder that goodbye's going to be. For all of them." By the time the Bobcat kittens were 4 months old, they'd become the sanctuary's unofficial mascots. Volunteers loved watching them from a safe distance as they practiced pouncing on leaves, bugs, or each other's twitching tails with growing skill. Daisy was still always nearby, but her role had shifted. She was no longer their mama, but a steady playmate and quiet protector. Emily knew the time was coming to make some hard choices. The kittens were growing fast, their baby spots fading, their eyes turning from soft blue to the rich golden hue of adult bobcats. In the wild, this was when they'd start pulling away from their mother. "The Mountain Wildlife Preserve in Colorado is interested," Lizzie said one evening, sitting beside Emily on the porch of her little cabin as the sunset lit up the tall pines in warm gold. "They've got a great bobcat habitat and an education program, and they're willing to keep all three together." Emily nodded slowly, her heart aching. "It's one of the better places we could hope for, but we've got to help them start letting go. We need to ease them away from Daisy before the transfer." The next morning, they gave it a try. While the bobcats were distracted with breakfast, they quietly moved Daisy to Emily's cabin, about a quarter-mile away from the kitten's enclosure. The reaction came quickly, and it was hard to watch. As soon as the bobcats realized Daisy was gone, they began pacing the enclosure, calling out with sharp, high cries that echoed across the grounds. None of them touched their food. They scratched at the doors, eyes wide, clearly confused and scared. But Daisy's reaction hit the hardest. She cried nonstop and pawed at Emily's door until her pads were raw. "This isn't working," Lizzie said after hours of rising tension. "They're too stressed. Patch hasn't stopped calling since we moved Daisy." Emily stood at the observation window, her heart sinking as she watched the smallest cub sitting in the middle of the enclosure, her head tipped back, calling over and over again for the one she thought of as her mother. "Bring Daisy back," Emily said quietly. "We'll have to do it more slowly." The reunion was deeply emotional. Daisy rushed into the enclosure and was instantly covered by 3 excited bobcats, all purring and nuzzling her, checking every inch of her, then curling up around her like they used to, visibly calmer. Emily and Lizzie shared a quiet, uneasy glance. The bond between them was even deeper than they had realized. Over the next 2 weeks, they tried different ways of easing the separation, short visits apart, placing them in nearby enclosures where they could still see each other, slowly increasing the time and space between them. None of it worked. Any stretch of time without Daisy left the bobcats withdrawn, barely eating or playing. And Daisy, in turn, grew anxious and low energy when away from them. "I've never seen anything like this," Emily admitted during a phone call with Dr. Rivera. "It's like they don't even notice they're not the same species anymore. They've made their own little family." "It's rare," Dr. Rivera said thoughtfully, "but not impossible in these kinds of environments. There have been cases of unusual bonds between species, but the bigger question was what would be best for the animals in the long run." Things came to a head when representatives from the Mountain Wildlife Preserve arrived to assess the bobcats for transfer. Thomas Wilkins, the lead zoologist, spent an entire day quietly observing the strange little family before sitting down with Emily in her office. "They're in excellent shape," he said, flipping through his notes. "Healthy, alert, beautiful cats. But I have serious concerns about separating them from the dog. It could undo a lot of their progress." "So you're not taking them?" Emily asked, feeling a mix of disappointment and quiet relief. Wilkins rubbed his chin. "I didn't say that. What if we took the dog too?" Emily stared at him. "You're not serious. Daisy's a domestic dog. She's supposed to be in a home, with people." "Hear me out," Wilkins said, leaning forward. "We've got staff housing at the preserve. One of our senior keepers, Maria, has been looking for a companion dog. What if Daisy lived with her, but still spent supervised time each day with the Bobcats? As they grow, we'd gradually reduce the time she spends with them, helping them adjust naturally, without the trauma of a sudden break." It was an unusual idea, but the more Emily thought about it, the more it made sense. The preserve had more space, more resources, and a larger team to give the animals what they needed. After some serious talks, meetings with the sanctuary board, and a long video call with Maria herself, Emily gave her approval. Departure day was emotional. Emily and Lizzie rode in the transport van with Daisy and the Bobcats, who were settled in roomy crates beside them. Daisy stuck close to the carriers, sometimes letting out soft whines, as if trying to comfort the cubs during the ride. The Mountain Wildlife Preserve was stunning, tucked into the Colorado Rockies, with wide-open habitats and a full team of wildlife experts. Maria, the senior feline keeper, was in her 30s, calm and kind, and immediately won Emily's respect with her deep knowledge and warm presence. "They'll have 3 full acres of forested space," Maria explained as she led them to the newly prepared enclosure. "It's designed to be as natural as possible while still letting us care for them and keep an eye on their progress." The Bobcats' first steps into their new home went smoother than expected. Daisy stayed nearby, watching as they cautiously explored. By sunset, they were already climbing the logs and rocky platforms that had been carefully arranged to mimic their wild habitat. When it was time for Daisy to go with Maria for the night, Emily braced herself, expecting the anxious cries and pacing they'd seen during earlier separations. But this time, something was different. Maybe it was the new place, or the space to explore, but the Bobcats only called a few times. They didn't panic. "I think they know," Maria said softly. "They feel this is home, and they trust she'll be back." Over the next 6 months, Emily got regular updates and even visited a few times. The transition had gone more smoothly than anyone imagined. The Bobcats were thriving in their new environment, strong, healthy, and fully into their sub-adult phase. Daisy had settled beautifully into life with Maria, enjoying the calm of a home while still visiting her Bobcat family each day. As time passed, the nature of their bond shifted. The Bobcats still welcomed Daisy warmly during visits, but they were growing up, spending more time roaming the enclosure, climbing, and sharpening their hunting instincts. By the time their first birthday came around, they were striking young adults. The closeness they had with Daisy had shifted from needing her to simply loving her presence. But what happened 18 months later surprised everyone. It started with a tense phone call from Maria. "Scout's not doing well, Emily," she said, her voice tight. "Dr. Mendez suspects a bacterial infection. He's not responding to treatment. He won't eat." Emily, now 60, and starting to think about retirement, though not ready to walk away from the work just yet, felt her stomach drop. These Bobcats were more than just rescues to her. They were part of her story. "How serious is it?" she asked. "Serious enough," Maria admitted. "He's isolated himself in the far corner of quarantine. Won't let anyone near, not even me." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'm coming, and I'm bringing Daisy." The drive to Colorado felt endless. By the time Emily arrived, Scout had been sick for 3 days, and his condition had worsened despite everything the vet team had tried. "We can't get the meds into him unless we sedate him," Dr. Mendez explained as they rushed toward the vet building. "And he's too weak for that. He needs to eat and take the antibiotics orally, but he won't touch anything." Outside the quarantine room, Maria was waiting with Daisy sitting quietly beside her. The dog had aged gracefully, her muzzle now frosted with white, but her eyes still clear and alert. "She knows something's wrong," Maria said gently. "She's been restless since Scout got sick, whining at the door like she wants to help." Through the window, Emily could see Scout lying in a corner of the room, his breathing labored, his once vibrant coat dull and flat. He looked fragile, worn down by the illness. "Let Daisy in," Emily said quietly but firmly. "If anyone can reach him, it's her." They fitted Daisy with a harness and leash for safety, then opened the quarantine door with care. Daisy stepped inside slowly, her nose twitching, ears up. She spotted Scout immediately and let out a soft whine. Scout lifted his head, weakly searching for the source of the sound. For a second he looked confused, like his memory was foggy. Then he made a low, familiar sound. It wasn't quite a meow, not quite a chuff. But Emily recognized it instantly. It was the same sound he used to make when greeting Daisy as a kitten. Moving with quiet focus, Daisy padded over to him, ignoring the quiet warnings from the vet staff. She lay down beside Scout and began gently licking his face and ears, the same way she had years ago when he was a frail, motherless cub. And then something happened that no one expected. Scout, who had refused food for days, allowed Dr. Mendez to approach. He didn't flinch or pull away as a small bowl of broth with dissolved antibiotics was placed in front of him. With Daisy by his side, bringing the comfort and calm only she could offer, Scout slowly began to sip the medicated broth. For the next 3 days, Daisy barely left Scout. She lay next to him while he rested, nudged him gently to eat, and stayed close in a way that seemed to do more than any medicine. When Patch and Rascal were briefly brought in to visit, the scene nearly broke Emily's heart wide open. 3 grown bobcats reunited with their canine mother in a moment of shared need. Scout's recovery was slow, but steady. By the end of the week, he was eating well again and showing more energy. The antibiotics finally began working, and his condition improved from critical to hopeful. "It's something else," Dr. Mendez told Emily as they watched Scout take his first careful steps around the quarantine pen, Daisy walking patiently beside him. "I've been working with wildlife for 2 decades. I've never seen a bond like this." "Love doesn't care about species," Emily said quietly, thinking of all she'd witnessed through the years. When Scout was strong enough to return to the main enclosure, Maria offered a gentle suggestion. "Just for today," she said, "I think Daisy should go with him. It might help ease the transition." It wasn't typical protocol, but given all they'd seen, the preserve's director agreed. With staff watching closely, Daisy accompanied Scout back to the enclosure where Patch and Rascal were waiting. Emily stood on the viewing deck and watched something she knew she'd remember for the rest of her life. As Scout stepped inside, his siblings ran to him, purring and bumping heads in quiet joy. Then, as if it had been rehearsed, but it hadn't, they all turned to Daisy. Each of them found a spot beside her, surrounding the dog who had once licked their tiny faces clean and kept them warm through their darkest days. For a long, silent moment, the whole little family rested together. Cat and dog, wild and tame, held together not by biology, but by something deeper. "This," Emily whispered to Lizzie, who had flown in as soon as she heard Scout was sick. "This is why I've done this all these years. For moments like this, moments that remind us healing doesn't always come the way we expect." In the years that followed, Daisy's relationship with her bobcat family shifted once again. As they grew into fully independent adults, they needed her less, but the bond stayed. Daisy, now older but still lively, continued her daily visits, more companion than caretaker now, but still a part of their world. Together, the Sanctuary and Preserve published a report on the case, adding something truly unique to the field of wildlife rehabilitation. Emily, who finally retired at 65, often spoke about the experience in talks to young wildlife students. "Sometimes," she'd tell them, showing a slide of Daisy curled beside her bobcats, "the best medicine isn't found in a bottle or a procedure. Sometimes it's in meeting a need so basic, so real, it crosses every line we thought mattered." And on quiet evenings when she returned to visit, Emily would still find Daisy, older now, her movements slower, resting peacefully by the fence. Nearby, the 3 adult bobcats lounged close, their connection unchanged by time. "The unthinkable," Emily would whisper, remembering the day Lizzie first floated the idea of pairing a dog with wildcats. Sometimes the unthinkable is exactly what's needed. And there, in the glow of a golden sunset, wild and domestic, orphan and rescuer, still a family in every way that counts, they remain together, a living reminder of what love, trust, and second chances can truly do. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next true story of kindness and resilience.